Um, I've been thinking about this poem for over a year.
Please introduce yourself,
All right,
young lady.
I'm Mona Toscano,
And?
and I've been thinking about this poem for
But before you've been thinking about this for a year, you've been the poet laureate of Newburgh.
Oh,
Come on.
you've said that. All right, I have been honored. I have been so verily honored with the appointment as Poet Laureate of the city of Newburgh. And it is a city that I have come to love. I have had a love-hate relationship with it, but I've come to realize really what a wonderful, unique city it is. I knew from the very beginning, before I came to live here, that it had a dynamism. I compared it and I compared Beacon, but Beacon seemed sort of lackluster compared to the excitement that Newburgh exudes. And Newburgh is such a challenge city. I don't know how it gets by. It doesn't have a tax base, and yet it has so many needs. Streets and police and firemen. And yet, the people who come just add so much to it. It's so cosmopolitan. We have people from all the continents of the world. And we have historic sites, and we have architecture. That's part of our fame. Anyway, I've been thinking about this particular poem for over a year, from the particular incident in the poem. And I've realized today that I could really tell it in a different way. And so I'm almost hesitant to read this version, but nonetheless, this is the start of a story that I'd like to tell about our challenge city. Laundromat scene, that's spelled S-E-E-N. It was a cold February Sunday before the virus arrived a whole year. I went to the laundromat, Wash-A-Lot, on the corner of Liberty and South Street. There was a man huddled in the corner. At first it didn't seem like a man. It seemed like a pile of oily clothes. He had a coat over himself, and you couldn't see if he was staring or sleeping. Actually, you couldn't see that there was anyone there, except it did exude a sense of humanness. Actually, it's not unusual to have a clump of piled clothes in the laundromat, of course, or at the front window. But it is unusual to have a man onto that clump of clothes. To tell the truth about the homeless in our city, we do have a few. But such is not unusual in urban and even rural America. Newburgh's various style of historic architecture, one of its legacies of fame, of little use to the scattered, rambling indigent, except for intermittent abandoned houses where some homeless camp out in caves and basements. Some poor light fires in the useless marble Victorian fireplaces therein, and sometimes the houses catch on fire. Luckily, we have a stalwart fire department that minimizes such damage. And more truth be told, our city is doing a fine job of selling houses not on the tax roll, especially with the exodus of Brooklynites and others fleeing to escape the virus. The claim is that the housing market here has increased 20% in the past epidemic year. Our Newburgh ministry has plans to open a new shelter for the homeless. But back to the laundromat man. He was probably ensconced for heat. We have a few amiable dormitories in our city, but There are homeless who prefer not to sleep ensemble for fear of being robbed of the few scraps of dirty clothes they own and paraphernalia of, that they wrap in rags like sacred relics. Some carry their dribble of soiled belongings in black, heavy plastic construction bags. The better off have shopping carts, open wire trunks on wheels instead of suitcases. Suitcases of little use when the poor don't have suits. They're lucky, as the man in this telling, to have a coat, a long black wool coat. Yes, as said, the pile didn't move. And between my peregrinations from the laundromat and home, the washing and then the drying cycles, it takes some 2 hours. As I was about to fold my dried clothes, I heard a young woman address the man who now peeked through his pile. "I already gave you something." Perhaps he thought he had been sleeping when she did. Touched by his abject condition, I went up to him and handed him $1. He stood up tall and lanky, probably Jamaican, in his 50s. His eyes were red and he smelt of alcohol. "You've had a rough day," I said. "Yes, it's been a hard time," he said. Kindly, I held his shoulders and said, "You'll have to drink. You'll have to drink." He jerked straight up. "You have to drink water," I said. "Morning and night, water." He was attentive. What do you know? Here's not the 3rd page, yeah. Doleful, but not relieved. A poor man.
Oh, back up. Sit up straight. I will edit it. Continue now on that page.
When I left, he returned to his crumbled state. I remain embarrassed with what I had given him. A poor broken man. He couldn't even have brought a small bottle of water of Poland Spring with that. A mere token.
Very powerful.
I want to redo it because I now that I've written it on paper, I see it anew. And so,
Explain that for the audience. It'd be a very important lesson.
There are many ways to tell a story. I mean, the Greeks knew that. There are different versions of the myths. And, each of them is true, has its own truth. But I see this man in a different light now that I put him on paper. Yes, we have homeless in our city, and we have a few shelters. And we also have this exodus of newcomers that are so happy with our wonderful historic homes. What a commingling. And that in itself, these two different groups of people, is a challenge to our city. Let's hope that we can equalize somehow these two groups of people.
Bravo, bravo. Thank you, Mona. It's always a pleasure.
Oh la la.